Hello everyone, welcome back. You're watching Empyrion Galactic Survival episode 136. I'm Enigmius and today we're continuing with the Heracles build. We're just kind of looking out the window here at the trade station. I don't think there's even anyone in there that's just kind of sitting there. I want to go raid it, but I haven't had a chance. That's not what we're really here to talk about. We're here to look at the progress that we've made on the Heracles since the last episode. We're going to send out the drone because we need that extra viewing range. And while we get out here, first of all, thank you to everyone who offered their feedback on the playback speed of the last video. I agree, it is too fast, so we're going to go back to the standard 4 times for straightforward portions of the build, and then we'll kind of slow it down a little bit for the more detailed sections so that it's easier to see. And we're going to move in a little bit closer so that the drone can survive. I had originally recorded most of what it took to get done what I have done here, and then I wasn't happy with it actually, and I stripped it all down and I started rebuilding it, and I ran out of hard drive space without realizing it for the recording. So that's why I'm showing you live what I've done, so that I can show it to you in a way that makes sense and make sure that you have a chance to look at it, as opposed to trying get some basic footage out of it and then show you from there. You'll notice that the frame rate is starting to drop in certain circumstances. I apologize for that. It's the ship. It's too damn big. Some points of view come around here, it's all nice and smooth and happy, and then over here lots of glass and stuff is probably a big part of the problem. Regardless, what we've got down here is basically the end of the tube, and attached to the end of this glass tube is going to be a very small but functional cockpit, the gunner's sort of cockpit, so to speak, that'll be an option for people who want to get down and dirty with the fixed barrel guns that will be affixed to the front of the ship somewhere in this area over here, so that things line up properly. And the whole idea here is we don't need a ton of space. We don't need to make this cavernous sort of thing in order to make that happen. So somewhere in here is where we're going to tuck that. And then down here we've got some bulkheads that we attached to the stuff that you saw in the last episode, putting that great big long sort of inner hull down the length of the botanical section. Then we had just a little bit more that we needed to extend it out this way. And then we put it the very front section on a 22.5-degree slope coming down this way. Now I should point out that this is sort of like a cutoff view. I've only done the starboard side of the ship. You can see here, I haven't done that side. For the front, it will probably be pretty symmetrical, just the very front of it. And then as we move towards the back is where things will be quite different from one side to the other. But the front, I mean, there's not a huge point to making things asymmetrical just for the sake of saying that we did. So we'll probably just duplicate this across and call it a day. And then there's other things that we can do by way of texturing and things that will be asymmetrical to kind of reinforce the whole idea. So the front section will just be like as a base, this great big 22.5-degree slab coming down, and then we'll be detailing it later on. Pretty straightforward. Then over here, hopefully the drone can keep a view on things. This is where we're starting to get into the area where things are overlapping, and I really like this idea just from a point of view of doing something different with the aesthetic, but also doing it in a way that's very functional and actually contributes to the ship, in this case in terms of enhanced defense. Now if you're really clever and you're going up against a ship this size, yeah, you could come down here and you can angle up this way and you can avoid all of this armor, and what are you going to hit? Nothing. It doesn't matter. But you can see we've got this lower section here comes down and it covers up that rounded end that you can see in here. We basically, with the botanical section, we finished it off on a flat end like this that sort of comes down and out and rounded and then works its way back in. I didn't really want that as the end of the whole front end of the ship, because it's a little bit difficult to do anything interesting with something like that. You can't, it's very difficult to make blocks work and do any kind of transitions or anything like that. For this specific build, I'm okay with not pushing myself to work on those kinds of transitions. I'm going to be working on transitions in other ways, in other areas. So we have basically these overlapping plates across the front of the ship, except for this central section that's also a great big plate coming down. It's going to be a big beefy front end, I guess is the short way of describing it. And then you can see down here along the side, this is the original primary outer hull for the botanical area, and then we've attached some blocks, and to those blocks we've attached another great big sheet of combat steel that will actually be extending all the way down the entire length of the botanical section. So when we're talking about defending our ship, this is where a lot of it is going to come from. Is we've got the inner layer, and then we've got an outer layer, and then this top section here is actually going to come out a little bit farther and then come down like this, and it'll be like a second layer across the upper portion here. Just because I tend to overlook defenses on the top of the ship, because I tend to look at the game from the point of view of playing on planets where most of the things that you're fighting, they're either below you or it's easily arranged so that they are below you one way or the other. This being something that's more suited to functioning in space, I want to make sure that we're not overlooking any main part of the ship in terms of the protection that we provided, just because that's one of my Achilles heels with previous builds, is not really giving a lot of thought to that. So now that you've seen what I've been doing, and you can kind of see where we're going in terms of this idea of the layered effects. Do I have any layers down here yet? Yes, I do. It's a little bit difficult to see. We'll try and squeeze in here and kind of turn around and look at it. There we go. So we've got another layer that actually comes up from the bottom. It's attached to the same big sheet of combat steel that the rest of the front layers are attached to. And it kind of comes up and it curves a little bit. It follows the hull, the primary outer hull. And then it comes up here, and it's got this little detail here that when I see that, I kind of think of it in terms of things that were almost maybe kind of intended to interlock, but they don't. And we could change the layout of this part here around a little bit and reinforce that whole idea that they could almost interlock if you wanted them to. It's not that important to me right now. I'm sticking with this little rabbit, or whatever you want to call it, on this edge, just because I think it looks interesting, even though it doesn't necessarily denote any specific function. It's not like the ship is going to transform or anything like that. So up here, again, I'm just actually going to show you the build and the layout for the profile. This is actually going to be an important piece that's going to require some profiling on this upper section here. And then by the time that's all done, you'll have a pretty good idea where we're going with the botanical section. So enough yammering, let's get to it. One of the things that I have to keep in mind with this build, because it's so large, is sometimes I come up with ideas, and from the time I come up with the idea until the time I'm actually in a position to execute that idea, I forget what the idea was. In this case, one of the ideas that I had was this notion that I don't have to worry about making the outer plates conform to the profiles in the inner structure. So we've got the armored glass tube with the rooms attached to it, all the different things stowed inside, and then we've got the primary outer hull more or less wrapped around that. And the idea is that that's the first line of defense against any kind of hostile activity towards the ship. And I wanted to make sure that we were getting good coverage all the way around without being necessarily wasteful in materials by making things larger than they had to be. So we've got the bulkheads in place, and then we've got more or less a single layer of combat steel all the way around. But when it comes to these outer plates that are designed for defense, and also the look, the aesthetic of the ship, they don't have to conform to that primary outer hull. And that little rule in the back of my mind, and it's not a rule, it's just a guideline, but you get the idea. Having that in the back of my mind would have saved me a lot of time, because that was the idea from the beginning, is that we could make a lot of really interesting statements, I guess you could say, with the aesthetic of the ship that we do independently of what's going on underneath these outer plates. So we've got this section that we're putting in now that basically consists of, if you imagine one great big sheet of combat steel bent at a 90-degree angle and then set on top of the ship, that's kind of what we're getting at here. Everything else in this section is sort of curved. We've got the inner section with all the armored glass with the botanical section that we kind of had sloping down and kind of sagging almost in appearance, and then we put the almost circular tube of combat steel around it, and now we're sitting this big heavy-duty 90-degree plate of combat steel on top. It gives the ship, in addition to the sloped section in the very front, that 22.5-degree angle, it gives the ship a really a more aggressive line, as opposed to what would happen if we had tried to take this outer plate and sort of wrap it around the existing primary outer hull. If you get the meaning of what I'm trying to say, once we get that 90-degree plate sort of in place, and we've got a couple of sections on it where it's got a little bit of curvature going on just to kind of soften it, but those are towards the back. The front end is still that sort of almost chisel point extending forward. It looks like you wouldn't want to get rammed by this ship, but then we have the plates underneath that are kind of soft and curved that don't stand out as much. And in fact, the very bottom plate stood out so little that as I was doing all of this and kind of getting things done, I completely forgot about it. I did the top plate, the big 90-degree section, and then I did the middle section, completely forgot about the bottom section, but that's okay. All we'll need to do to finish that is extend the profile straight back, similar to what we're doing with this midsection now. So you won't necessarily miss out on anything. You've already seen it. And we're going to pull it back so that the side and the underside of the ship have that extra layer of protection from having these layered plates. And then in the next episode, we're going to start working in the midsection on the starboard side. We'll just continue where we left off and work our way towards the very back of the ship. Some of the things that we have to keep in mind for this side of the ship is we need some maneuvering thrusters, of course. We need 8 of the double XL super large capital vessel thrusters that we're going to have for maneuvering, and I'm pretty sure if it doesn't feel like enough, we'll have room to put more, but 8 will be the starting number. We also want to have some weapons on this side, and we want them oriented thoughtfully to hopefully make sure that we're getting a certain amount of bang for buck, and we're not leaving any huge sections of the ship undefended in case you come up against an opponent that can easily outmaneuver you. You never know. And someone suggested that we have like a bridge on this side kind of sticking up, and I'm going to kind of see if I can come up with an idea that would incorporate that. I'm definitely not opposed to the idea of having more than one bridge. Obviously, we had in the last CV, the Saturnus, we had 2 cockpits. One was the gunner's cockpit and one was the central bridge. We can have 3, 4, however many we want. But the whole idea is that this side of the ship isn't just combat steel. There's going to be functional elements here that are going to be absolutely critical to the ship's success. And we have to kind of keep those in mind and incorporate them as an opportunity presents itself. The other side of the ship, when we get going, is going to have basically the same requirements, only it's also going to have 3 hangars. So it'll be just as important there as it is on this side to kind of keep in mind that it's not just combat steel. So if you want to be notified about the next and future episodes when we continue the build and make the ship even bigger than it is now, the easiest way to do that is to subscribe to my channel or follow me on social media. Links for social media are always in the information section below the video. Feel free to leave your comments and feedback. Thanks for watching, guys, and take care.